So I've come down here and I've got about an hour before I need to be home. And I've got a list of jobs that will probably take about 3 hours if I was doing them fairly quickly. So, I mean, I'm not going to get them all done, I don't think, which is that I wanted to prepare an area to sow some parsnips because I've been meaning to do that for about a month and haven't managed to get around to it. I need to do some watering, which I have something fairly exciting to show you. I don't know whether I showed you before, but seeing as I haven't started collecting any rainwater yet, I have a way of not using a tap. And I'm sure that if you've watched Only Fools and Horses and some of my previous videos, you might have figured out how I was doing that. And I've got probably about 3 days worth of weeding. So that one I will not prioritise. I might do a little bit here and there. Last time I took out my first batch of peas because they were no longer being particularly productive. So I've still got the other ones in. They've started to flower and they've got a bit of fruit on them. I think they've got some peas on them. Maybe, oh yeah, I can see some small peas starting to form on these. But what I think I'll then do, because I couldn't be bothered for them to wait, is that I do have some pole French beans, as in the climbing French bean variety, which I'm planning to put some of them up here in some of the spaces. I will need to make another pea frame. But look at this. This is always an exciting thing in the summer, is just seeing runner beans flying up the poles, getting an extra few inches every day keeps me going, considering how bad a state a lot of the stuff is in. But actually, I feel I don't want to give this impression that I've got a negative feeling about things, because I don't. I actually really enjoy the process of seeing things coming along, even though there is, much more of a struggle than if you're gardening in somewhere that you've been cultivating for quite a while. So yeah, I'm pleased with the way that things are going. I've got loads of broad beans that some of them are nearly ready to pick. I could pick them early, like some of the smaller ones like this, and I think you can just eat the whole lot. And I quite regularly pick the tops, just to pinch out the tops so that they don't get so infected with black fly. And I think that tastes great too. Even though the radishes are quite affected by weeds growing around them and they're getting eaten by stuff, I think when I looked earlier, oh yeah, I'm having to share them with stuff, but some people might think that's gross, but whatever. See, there is quite a hefty batch, especially if we look in here. I reckon there's a fair few. Wow. I remember reading a few weeks back, and it was at the point where the broad beans were looking a bit sad and they'd been getting eaten by stuff and they were yellowing, and the most depressing part about it was saying broad beans are the vegetable if you want to feel good about your veg patch, because they're so easy to grow. Which obviously makes you feel like a complete failure, because that type of narrative, when you're trying to learn about something and you're struggling with it, and someone says, "Oh, it's so easy," just makes you feel like an utter moron. So I'm pleased that it feels like the weather and the conditions have saved me from my feelings of being a moron. Yeah, they're quite impressive now, really. I went round to some open gardens yesterday, and there was loads of the veg in some of the people's gardens, and it looked absolutely immaculate. But the only thing that I think that I had better than everybody else was the broad bean. So yeah, they did actually manage to restore some level of self-esteem. And although you might think it's strange to put your self-esteem in the quality of the produce that you're growing, it's inevitable. And yeah, I could see that there was no point in me getting upset about the fact that in their absolutely stunningly beautiful greenhouses, clearly their indoor tomatoes are doing a lot. They were much further along than these. But who cares? Some of these are actually looking quite good. And you can see these leaves that sort of crinkled up. I'm not sure whether that was when it got dry. They haven't looked that happy the whole time, but up top it's recovering now that the weather has become a bit more favourable. And I don't think it'll be too long before I'll be able to get some of these fruits off, because they're developing nicely. And one of the things that I didn't show you last time, which I was concerned with at one point, and although there are some weeds and things in there, these onions have come on absolutely loads. And they came on within the course of about a week. They went from being pathetically small, like some of them, let's see, some of the small ones, they were almost all like they were almost all about this size, as in the whole plant was this size. And then in the space of a week, suddenly they were like they are now. And they've stalled a little bit, but they're definitely swelling now. And considering that I grew them from seed and that I put them into a patch where it was absolutely chock full of weeds, if I get any crop off them, then I'm pretty chuffed with that. And obviously I could get tons of the onion tops that I could use already, which I may harvest some of those just to put into some noodle dishes, and that's what I've got planned for it tonight. And then when I'm digging up the potatoes, I'll put the onion tops into them too. So I think that is really encouraging, because I've had people say that it's futile to even expect to get anything in the first year of having a plot that is this neglected. Because if I show you the plot next door, if you consider that a lot of the space looked almost identical on this plot when I started, look at what would have happened to most of the plot had I done absolutely nothing. So even though I've struggled, I think that is a fairly significant achievement, given that I've obviously been juggling it around doing everything else as well, because I'm not doing this full time, obviously. And then one of the failed experiments, which I thought that the struggle would be what it has been, which is the strawberry tower, which realistically I'm never here enough to water this. So it needs tons of water. I think it probably needs watering every single day, and I just can't get down here that often. Dug out this little pit, and you can see the water just doesn't stop flowing from in there, which means where I was identifying where the spring was before, it's definitely in here somewhere. So what my plan is to put the pond around there, which is the low point, and it seems to just fill itself. I cannot think that I'll possibly want a liner, because I think that it will then just sort of fill it in between the liner space and the ground. So I can't think that it would possibly work, because the water hasn't stopped flowing and it hasn't really rained very much for a little while now, so there shouldn't be much water coming up through the ground anymore, and yet there is. So, well, there's certainly not water coming in from above the ground. It's not flowing down the hill, it's coming from in there rather than up the slope. So I'm not an expert with how groundwater behaves in any stretch of the imagination, but I do know that the water is coming from in there. So whenever I dig a hole, it fills up with water, and it's now nearly July. In fact, I should check the date, it might even be July. It's the 1st of July, and there's still water coming out of there, so that would be unusual if the spring wasn't in there. So I know it's in there, and so I want to make some sort of feature of having that water on here by having an absolutely enormous pond, enormous by allotment standards, because yeah, it just feels like an opportunity to have something like that, and I think that'd be quite cool to have a natural pond that fills by itself and that I can use for water and will attract and house lots and lots of wildlife, and I can grow loads of plants in there, because you know, there's soil at the bottom of the pond. I haven't got to make any type of elaborate construction or backfill subsoil into a pond in order to grow plants into it or put them in containers. I can just plant them directly into the soil that is at the bottom of the pond, which I think is, yeah, that's the sort of thing that gets me quite excited. I might let some of them develop a bit more. Look at those big dongs in there. You can see all the flowers up here and loads of pods that are already quite far along. And I know that people have probably been getting loads of crops and harvests off their broad beans for ages now, but this isn't about comparison, this is about personal joy. And I feel really good about that. And if you remember the mashua that I tied up a little while ago, these leaves, they look similar to nasturtium, but they're a little bit less peppery. They do taste fairly similar. They've probably been pissed on by foxes. So I should really wash this, but as you've probably figured out by now, I'm a little bit dirty when it comes to eating crops, because Grazing on them is an immense pleasure, and I'm willing to risk the occasional little bit of fox or cat piss. I'm gonna have this in a salad tonight. So I managed to get these off as spring onions, which were generally the smaller ones, because I don't think that they'll have enough time to fully swell. So rather than them competing with the clusters of onions that are there, I want the ones that I've left to swell, and I'm going to get a nice little bonus crop out of these. I probably could have left some more of them in, but whatever. I'm pleased that I've got them out. And these that I thought were cardoons, the heads have swollen a little bit. Someone suggested that it could just potentially be that they haven't been in the ground very long. But if I show you the plant that they were taken from, the flowers on that are not that big either. And these are quite spiky flowers. But I am going to take them back home, and I'm going to try one, see whether it's got reasonable flavour, because if it's a cardoon I think that they're a little bit more bitter and the texture isn't so good. But we'll see. It's not going to be poisonous, so if it just tastes crap then I won't eat very much of it. I haven't got a great deal of it anyway, so. And this isn't a demonstration in how to prepare it. I'm just sort of whiling away the time by just clipping these with this pair of secateurs. Oh well, the flowers are going to be gorgeous when they open up as thistles, which I'm planning to let a lot of them do. Certainly not the most impressive haul that I've ever seen, and I see lots of stuff on social media with people showing their absolutely gorgeous looking veg, but I've got stuff and I'm pleased with that, and I know that if I'm able to continue putting in the amount of time and effort, that it won't be that long before I will be taking some more hefty crops away. But I'm not really doing it for the result. Is exciting, but I just quite like being down here. I like the feeling of excitement for coming and improving something. I remember that I spoke about how there was a comment on one of my earlier videos on the allotment where somebody said it was a beautiful thing to have some work to do. That, I guess what I took from that is that it's nice to have something where you genuinely understand the value. You understand the value to you and the way that it makes you feel, and it has a tangible result, which is, you know, making or using the land to be able to make food, which is just an incredible feeling. Before I wax lyrical and sound like a total bellend and become effusive about this sort of thing, there is a genuine connection that you gain by growing food, and that type of excitement is difficult to contain when you get something that you have invested time into, but also relied upon the miracle that is that if you put these things in the ground as a result of all of those thousands of years of people passing on seeds and things remaining in cultivation, as well as the fact that the sun comes up and the conditions are right for these things to grow. Even in spite of all of climate change, there are still things that are actually able to grow, which I think is pretty remarkable. And if you've been thinking about doing it, I would genuinely really encourage you to persevere with it, because those ups and downs of seasons not going the way that you hope that they do and things attacking your crops, it can hurt, but at the same time, it's like following a sports team in that it hurts when they don't do well, or it hurts when you feel like they're not putting in the effort that you hoped that they would. But that is part of the appeal of it, that it gives you that whole range of emotions about something that clearly, for most people, they don't fully rely to subsist on their allotment or on the produce they're making in their back garden. They're doing it for pleasure and for the fact that you can grow things that you can't get from the supermarket, and that you can harvest things and make use of more of the plant than you can if you just rely on how they're prepared for the supermarket. But if you do need to go to the supermarket, it's still much easier to do that, as far as most people who are working a normal job will have enough money to certainly time-wise, the investment wouldn't be justified. We're not doing it because we're figuring out some way, like we're accountants, to why we're doing it because it's immensely pleasurable. It takes you through that whole range of emotions. Anyway, I did do exactly what I said that I was hoping not to do, which is effusively wax lyrical about things like a bell end. But it is a hobby, and it's something that I can see exactly why people get so passionate about it. Anyway, thanks very much for watching and listening to me ramble on about that, on the basis that I've got about a kilo of broad beans, including the pods, and some spring onions, and a little bit of mashua leaves.